So, just like that, we get an announcement for a Quidditch multiplayer game. This kind of, maybe in a sense, tells me that my hypothesis on what Warner Brothers is doing for their gaming arm is more than likely accurate, or as accurate as we can get it with what it is that we're seeing. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. We like to talk about gaming. We look at the business perspective because that's how you're able to figure out all what's going on. In gaming today, what we have is a lot of reactionary, and a lot of people don't really help because all of this adds fuel to the fire. We got to see a live service game, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, multiplayer shooter from the DC universe set in Arkham, and this did not necessarily bode well for a lot of people. I, on the other hand, knew that this was probably a strategy that Warner Brothers was using to sandwich their live service strategy between single-player games. The problem, nonetheless, was Gotham Knights, which was one of the single-player games that was going to sandwich Suicide Squad, was perceived as a live service game wrongly, even though it wasn't. Some people still came up with the so-called, it seems like it had live service elements in it type, description of the game and categorization, which overall gave the game kind of a bad perception. Reviewers didn't help. I have videos here where we actually have seen reviewers actually lie, and these guys have close to 500,000 views or more on their Gotham Knights takedown reviews, which is quite sad. But when you think about it, there is something here that must be paid close attention to, and that's the fact that business is what it is. These multiplayer experiences that have openings for monetization, as much as you and I may not necessarily be fans of them, they actually help to make or fund the single player projects. This is why your beloved Sony is going to invest in 11 of these live service games. Many people are jumping on Warner Brothers, but I think they're jumping way prematurely because they're not really paying attention to the big picture. So Suicide Squad right now is in the back burner or in the oven, but I don't necessarily think that strategy is going to change. This game is going to be released, but if you look very closely at even who is actually working on this particular game, you're going to see something very interesting. Unbroken Studios is not just any studio. It's actually a development hub with AAA veteran developers, and they were working on the Suicide Squad game, as well as their Hogwarts Legacy game, the Quidditch Champions. I said the Hogwarts Legacy game, sorry. I take that back. The Quidditch Champions Harry Potter game, which is not tied to Hogwarts Legacy at the moment anyways, based on what it is that we know. From what we had actually paid attention to, and I mentioned this in videos prior to the release of Hogwarts Legacy, was that Quidditch was probably not capable of, making its way into the game because of technical challenges. I know that sounds crazy, but here is Troy Levitt, who is someone who worked on the Hogwarts Legacy game for a while before having left the project. He said, "I was a major advocate for including Quidditch in Hogwarts Legacy and was very sad when it became clear that we weren't going to be able to. So, although not developed by Avalanche and not tied to Hogwarts Legacy as far as I know, I still have high hopes for this online multiplayer version." So again, one multiplayer online game goes into the shadows, another one pops up, but still being sandwiched by single player games because these companies, for the most part, kind of get the pattern as to what fans, in a sense, want. Yes, there is evidence that Warner Brothers has been wanting to go live service with a number of their IPs, but you cannot throw all your eggs in one basket. You kind of have to, from a business perspective anyways, you have to balance things. This is why those who were, in a sense, upset with Suicide Squad thinking they won some kind of victory, in my opinion, are punching air. I hope you're looking at this Quidditch game and seeing that the fans, yes, even though in this case they actually want this game, it's still a strategy where they're bringing in this particular set of, I would say business strategies to fruition where they want to bring live service game right after they bring, a single player game. So that's basically everything that, they're pretty much putting together for us. So it's very, very critical that as DC fans, we're paying very close attention to everything that's going on because, one thing that I have always said is, the fans of the other IPs, the fans of the other properties out there, they really are, in a sense, somewhat open-minded to different things that may be coming their way in terms of different video games, in terms of different IPs or different possibilities. And I think this is why, for the most part, there seems to be a lot more in terms of production geared towards them. With the superhero genre, things are kind of weird. It's one thing to make a superhero game, but then it's another thing to do it in the plethora of other superhero games, and then that game not get judged heavily because of people's preferences. So for the most part, I think it's just a matter of just kind of taking time and stepping back a little bit and looking at the overall picture. Because those who may say, well, I didn't necessarily like Gotham Knights. There are things in the game that don't appeal to me. At the end of the day, again, like I usually say, it doesn't mean that that's the end game. There are all kinds of different fun aspects to this whole conversation, like, say, the Middle-earth developers, Monolith, who are working on a single player, well, at least from what we know, Wonder Woman game. So the grand picture and the grand scheme of things is that they mix up this basket, and that's how it's going to go. Players can cry and whine all they want about, say, oh, we don't want this in a live service game, we don't want a shooter and all that stuff. But here's the thing. The company is the one that's paying the developers, and they're trying to do what companies do, which is make money. And from the days of FIFA with their Ultimate Team and the days of Destiny with all the money that they made and all of this data that's already out there proving that live service games can be profitable, and with Call of Duty even causing Sony to freak out, every publisher that can get their hands on a live service game will try their best to do so. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do single player games. In fact, it will be foolish for them to put their eggs in one basket, unless, of course, they have other business strategies like Epic Games, who makes Fortnite, but they also develop Unreal Engine, which makes them money once video games are actually made, or once movies or TV shows or ads are actually made with their engine. They make that change in the backyard. You know what I mean? But if you think about, say, these other studios, they really have to mix it all up. And Warner Brothers, they seem to be wanting to execute their strategy. With other titles coming out like Mortal Kombat 12 and so on and so forth, there's a wide slate of all kinds of different fun things that people can actually play. I think the biggest surprise is a lot of people say things like, we don't want multiplayer in Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, and all of these things, but they fail to realize that they already made them a single player game that did not have these, these elements that they, for the most part, did not necessarily want. But it seems like because of the reactionary nature of the internet and the way a lot of people pretty much try to, make things seem worse than they actually are, they've kind of convinced DC fans that there is really nothing out there for them, when in reality, there's actually a lot. Just because they're not all coming up or showing up at the same time doesn't really mean that that's the end of things. These games take a lot of time to develop. And usually you have to get past your concept phase before you go ahead and even show or talk about something like this. This Quidditch Champion game was actually kept under wraps for a while. I think it was just recently, basically today, that this studio came out with their announcement of the work that they were doing on the project. So this is all interesting. It seems like the business strategy that I hypothesized that Warner Brothers was trying to take steps to seems like it's going to be a thing. And Hogwarts Legacy fans who are looking for Quidditch will have the opportunity to be able to get into something like this as we start to even see some other studios that have been making single player games in the past few years eventually delve into this. In fact, if I wanted to give me maybe another example before I closed, we'll look at maybe, say, even Respawn. Respawn was making their Titanfall game. That game, good game, did not necessarily pan out because EA went crazy greedy and wanted to pretty much best Call of Duty. So they tried to sandwich Call of Duty between two of their games, Battlefield and Titanfall 2. And that just did not work out for the studio. But with the Star Wars game, they really did gain a lot of goodwill. So when we heard that they were making another first-person Star Wars game, seemingly that game is probably going to have some, multiplayer elements so that they can maybe start making some money like they did with Apex Legends. So this is kind of a general theme across gaming. And, as much as it may rub some people wrong, if you really want to see these passion projects that, a lot of people are actually craving, you're going to need more people that are going in for just those projects and making that their main focus. The indie developers, the small studios, the small teams, they are the ones that are going to be able to pull this stuff off. I know people still think it's impossible for a small studio to make a good game, but maybe you need to go into the indie scene to see what's going on, because a lot more smaller studios have been able to come up with successful games in the past few years, not even a long time ago. You can look at Cold Symmetry and their Mortal Shell game, and you're going to realize that that game was made with a very small team if you pay very close attention. So it's possible to get the job done. But I'll rest my case for now. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. What do you think about all of this in light of Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League? Was the community reaction an overreaction? I think it was. You may disagree, but feel free to share your opinions in the comment section and we'll talk about it. Thanks for watching the video. Appreciate you guys so much. Peace out.